Hey everybody out there, this is Seto and welcome today guys to another History of Yu-Gi-Oh episode. I believe we are on part 4 or 5 now, and I hope you guys are all ready for another episode. Today we're going to be focusing on, however, the time frame of July 2002 to October 2002. So later part of July to early part of October. There's a lot of things going on in the early part of October. We're going to see the game of Yu-Gi-Oh start to develop from this hodgepodge of pretty much I guess you say no tournaments at all, to start seeing tournament play actually. Now granted, I want you to keep in mind as I go through this episode, Yu-Gi-Oh, and I'm going to use an analogy here, is in its pre-Cambrian existence. It's still new, it's still evolving, there's a multitude of different decks, there's no defined meta. It's people taking Blue Eyes and Seto Kaiba structure decks that they brought and smashing it together with new stuff that just came out. Or people just going off the wall and just normal summoning Blue Eyes. It's still a thing. You're going to start to see by the end of this video that Yu-Gi-Oh is starting to develop a meta in some form or fashion, and that Yu-Gi-Oh is starting to have more of a defined play style. So without further ado, let's get started where we left off in last week's episode. Last month's episode, we talked about the July ban list, and here is just a recap of some of the things that got hit on the ban list that I'll put up on the screen for you guys. Now, you'll notice that pretty much this time frame between July to September, so July, August, pretty much, is just a beat down strategy that's being used. Your Legends, your 7-colored fish, your Summoned Skulls, and whatever other good cards are out there pretty much. That's what's being played as the main strategy. Now, come later in September, you're going to see a new set come out, Magic Rulers, which completely shakes up the game altogether. But before that, we have the organized play of tournaments starting to develop in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh. We have on September the 1st, 2002, our first tournament pack, Season 1, come out. That's awesome. This was given to stores that would play Yu-Gi-Oh. They would give them tournament packs and they would give them out as prize packs. They're the same as Astro packs, as OTS packs that we have now. It's the same exact thing, just a different time frame and a different era. And unlike today, where we get some imported cards of older cards we never got before, you see that sometimes in these OTS packs you get, that was happening, but they were mainly using it, looks like, in the early part of Yu-Gi-Oh, these tournament packs, as just a whole bunch of new cards coming in that were only given to players that participated in local sanctioned tournament play. So that's what they were given out for. That's why if you look at the first packs of tournament pack, it's just a whole bunch of new cards that hadn't been released yet. They were trying to catch up the TCG to the OCG, because in the OCG Yu-Gi-Oh have been out a lot longer. The only two things of note that came out of the tournament pack is Mechanical Chaser. The only thing, it has two important things about it. Number one, it's an 1850 beat stick. That means it can beat over Lajin and 7-colored fish. That's the main reason why it's important. When it came out, it was about a $60 to $70 card. If you look online now for a near mint, it's about 100 plus, usually. The other reason this card will become important later on is when we have limit removal come out. If you had Mechanical Chasers still, you could use limit removal with Mechanical Chaser to do a lot of damage and kill things. But limit removal is not out yet, and that strategy has not been developed yet. That's later down the road. And those were pretty much the only two reasons why Mechanical Chaser was a sought after card. Big Beater could be used for limit removal later down the road. The other card of note, which was already by this time power creeped, was Axe Raider, excuse me. Axe Raider was a Joey card. I love the artwork of the card, but it was already power creeped by this time. The 1700 attack normal summoner World Beater was power creeped already. Neo the Magical Swordsman and Battle Ox had already been power creeped because of 7-colored fish and Lajin. and Axe Raider was just, as soon as he came out, he was useless. He was already power creeped because there was other more powerful normal summonable beaters. So also one thing of note, I believe it was around this time that you started to see something, and if I can find it, I will post it on the video. You start to see around this time with organized play starting to happen more and more over the summer and the early fall. You see this thing that Konami was giving out, this huge wooden trophy of a Millennium Puzzle. I remember winning one of these puzzles, like you would take it home for like a month if you won after the season. So what they did pretty much was, and I'm going off what my memory is, I had to do some research about it, but pretty much what they would do is local sanctioned stores would have these big puzzles, this huge Millennium Puzzle, and after you would earn points just like you do on now for, you know, your Kasi ID and everything. So you would earn points, all right, and whoever was the point leader of that locals would be able to take the puzzle home for that season. And then when the new season started, okay, so then you would have a new season, and whoever was the point leader after that season, they would then get the puzzle to take home. So it was pretty much like a big trophy, just like you have nowadays, where people could go with these, you know, big, huge Yu-Gi-Oh belts and these things at local, you know, big events. If you have enough points, this was the first Yu-Gi-Oh trophy, and if you have one of these, or you know someone that has one, or even had it, that's a piece of Yu-Gi-Oh history right there. So awesome, awesome, awesome. There's not a lot out of there. I haven't seen one in years. I've seen one at a local store about 5 years ago, but that's about all. But these things were really cool when you could get them. But that's pretty much what's happening. You're starting to see organized play. And Toys R Us, even I think around the fall time, was starting to do organized tournaments as well. So organized play was starting to become more efficient. So pretty much we're going to go to September now, and by September 16th, we get a set that comes out that was meta-defining. Think of Duelist Alliance. Think of what was before Duelist Alliance with hat format. Very slow, very control-based, and how quickly Duelist Alliance sped up everything after that. All right? Imagine that with every set that's come out recently. With Metal Raiders, the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Just sped up more quickly than Legend of Blue Eyes. With Magic Ruler, and these are not baby steps, these are gigantic leaps. But with Magic Ruler, the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Took a enormous leap forward, you could say. Now, Magic Ruler you may know as Spell Ruler. There was a problem with Wizards of the Coast and Konami using the word magic. So, as the story goes, Konami had to change it from Magic Ruler to Spell Ruler. That's why if you look at spell cards, you'll notice up in the left-hand corner, you can tell if it's an original print because it'll say Magic on the little corner where the little spell bubble is at. So let's talk about some of the interesting and important cards that came out of Magic Ruler, as I'm going to refer it because that was its original intended name. You have Blue Eyes Toon Dragon, which is used in Exodia decks with Toon Table of Contents and everything down the road, and you have all the different tunes coming out. Mongolian, Toon Mermaid, a lot of the basic Toon stuff that we know, Toon Summon Skull, things of that nature, and you also have Toon World, as I'll put up on the screen right now, coming out as well. So pretty much just all the Toon stuff came out in this set as well. A lot of Pegasus stuff. Then we also have Delinquent Duo came out in this set as well. Delinquent Duo, if you've played GOAT format, you know how powerful this card is. Pay 1,000 life points, your opponent loses 2 cards. Pretty good. You also have one of the best ever spell cards in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Or the most impactful spell card ever in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! I guess you could say. Or most versatile, whatever you want to say. Mystical Space Typhoon. Mystical Space Typhoon, from the day of September 16, 2002, to probably the day Twin Twisters came out, or even past when Twin Twisters came out, when maybe a Cosmic Cyclone came out. This card was played in every deck, main deck or side deck, pretty much up into 2016 or 2017. It has been within the last year that people stopped playing MST because of things like Barrage, because of things like Diagram. Because the targets MST would take down would get effects in graveyard. That's why we use Cosmic Cyclone now. MST lasted pretty much the entire history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Up until very, very recently. That it die out, and I don't see it anymore. We have to take a moment of silence to rest in peace, MST. This card was literally probably with us through multiple formats. It helped us out in multiple situations. May it get over a Necro Valley, may it get over whatever else. That one back row that was a Mirror Force. A moment of silence for MST, please. Thank you. Now let's continue on. We have Snatch and Steal. Snatch and Steal, if you remember a couple of years ago, came off the ban list. And it was a broken card, but Snatch and Steal at this time was at 3 of pretty much until it got limited. Broken card, you had something I'll mention in the deck profile of Snatch Lock, which was a thing. But Snatch and Steal, very, very powerful spell card. You'll notice that Metal Raiders was more about traps, and spell cards, for the most part of Yu-Gi-Oh's early history, and even to this degree nowadays, even though monster effects are very important, have always been dominant in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! But in the early part of Yu-Gi-Oh! Spell cards were super dominant, and that's what made Magic Ruler an amazing set. So we have Snatch and Steal. Spellbinding Circle, though it was played with people that had it for fun, it was pretty much an early Fiendish Chain. You still got your effect stuff and everything, but it was a really deadly card in an era where monster effects were not as prevalent necessarily. We have Relinquish came out. Relinquish really was a pretty good ritual monster. At this time, you had other cards to search it. You had Senju and you had Sonic Bird that helped search out these pieces. Manju was not quite out yet. You also have Axe of Despair, which was the biggest equipped monster spell. You had Malevolent Nuzzler that came out of this set, but pretty much equipped spells weren't really used that much. You would use them here and there, but Axe of Despair was the first one that took was the most powerful equipped spell, for some time. You could equip it to white magical hats, attack a monster, rip a card out of your opponent's hand. You could get over a Blue Eyes with it. You could get around different things with it. So, along with Malevolent Nuzzler, which I'll put a picture up right now, the cards were the 2 best equipped spells, I guess you could say, in the game at this point in time. You also have Painful Choice, which is a broken card. You reveal 5 cards from your hand to your opponent chooses one of them, you add that to your hand, the rest go to the graveyard. This card will be on the first ban list when it comes out, and it was so good later on down the road because A, it thins out your deck, and B, what does it do? It sets up Lights and Dark in the graveyard for your BLS and Chaos Emperor Dragon when Invasion of Chaos comes out. Upstart Goblin. Upstart Goblin came out in this set. The Patrick Hoban card came out in this set pretty much. Forceful Sentry came out. This card is amazing. It's another card that helps rip cards out of your opponent's hand. Messenger of Peace was used in different stall decks. We have Giant Trunade, which upon initial release, it was not really used. It wasn't until after the banning of Heavy Storm that you see Giant Trunade see play. And we know how busted it could be in certain types of games and how it promoted OTKs later on to some degree. But at this time, you have to remember Heavy Storm's at 2 of. Nobody plays Giant Trunade. You also have Gravekeeper's Servant along later down the road with Macrocosmos and Banish cards. It set up a crazy little lock that you could do. And it was still used in mill decks that were played. You also have Megamorph, which also helped promote OTKs. You would see this being used in Cyber Cistern OTK way down the road. You also have Nimble Mamunga, which is a pretty good card. It set up tribute fodder and gained you life points back in a game that life point gaining back to this moment in time was pretty much D and Kito, the Cure Master. You also had Senju of 1,000 Hands that came out in this set as well. We know how good this card was because of Necro's format. Next, we have Cyberjar that came out of this set. You guys should know how good Cyberjar was. And for a short period in time, you could play it as a 3 of. Cyberjar was broken. You guys, if you haven't played against Cyberjar, it was amazing. It also, down the road, when Tournament Pack 2 comes out, you'll see Morphing Jar come out of that pack. And it promoted the first mill deck, I guess you could say, in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Not Light Swarms, nothing like that, but a mill deck that was called Empty Jar Deck. The objective was to mill your opponent's deck so they would not have enough cards to draw and thus lose the duel. And Konami has hated that deck for a long time, but this is the start of Empty Jar deck. You also have Confiscation that came out in this set, another card that rips cards out of your opponent's hand. Mahavelo was a great card with Axe of Despair. If I remember their effect off the top of my head, you could equip an equipped monster, and when an equipped monster was equipped card was equipped to Mahavelo, it gained an additional 500 attack, I believe it was. So it was 1550 attack, and if you equip it with Axe of Despair, it goes up to, what was it, 2,550. Now it's 3,050, I think, because the 500 attack boost, and it can get over a Blue Eyes White Dragon. So Mahavelo strategies were used. You will see this card when Rhoda comes out as well. People were using that card, especially with United We Stand and things of that nature. You also have Mystic Tomato, Shining Angel, Giant Rat, Mother Grizzly, UFO Turtle, and Flying Kamakiri #1. So all these cards I mentioned were floaters, and you're going to see them be used in multiple different decks, especially things like Mystic Tomato, which was used in Tomato Control and used a lot of different ways. Shining Angel, another card that was used for a long time in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Giant Rat will be used later on in Rat Toolbox, which was a great concept, and I played that deck, but Rat Toolbox and in other decks it would be used in. Mother Grizzly was a great card for water decks. Flying Kamakiri #1 is used in wind-based decks, and UFO Turtle is used in fire-based decks. So these cards you'll see throughout deck profiles in the later parts of Yu-Gi-Oh history. You also have in Magic Rulers the introduction of a new mechanic. So up to this time we had fusions, we had tributes, and we had some special summonings. Now we have a new special summoning mechanic called Ritual Summoning. Yay! Nobody played it until Necros, right? Or I guess you could say Demise OTK. But some people did play it. You had Relinquish, the best one, that's why it was a holo. You also had Crab Turtle come out of this set. You also had Hungry Burger, if everybody knows Hungry Burger. And you also have Performance of Swords coming out of this set. So you also have some other interesting things I'm going to mention that came out of this set that were used sparingly in different fun decks that people played. You had Karate Man, which was used in some decks. He would go up to 2,000 attack a monster, and then die. You also had Rush Recklessly also come out in this set as well. So now we're going to go over to talk about the deck profiles, about the meta, and talk more about that, the meta that was going on, and the decks that would be played in that time. And after that, guys, we will go and talk about the ban list of October.
Guys, now we're going to talk about the decks that came out during this time. We're going to be focusing on the September because we're focusing on Magic Ruler. So do keep in mind this was legal for a few weeks. And I found these deck profiles, lucky enough, I went through the Pojo archives and other sites from way, way back in the day, like Metagame and things of that nature. And I was able to find some deck lists from back then of people that had posted it. So here are 3 decks that were being played in that about month format, month and a half about, in this time of Yu-Gi-Oh! You'll notice that a lot of these parts are just interchangeable. They have the same lineup, and that's what they were using. Most people were using. Now, granted, there were other builds that were similar to this, but because they didn't have all the cards, they were using other choices. So say somebody didn't have 3 Forceful Sentry. Well, instead what they were running is maybe 3 Confiscation, or 2 Delinquent Duo on and 3 Confiscation. Different ratios on what your card pool were. But let's go over this. This is with hindsight, so keep in mind when I'm doing these things from back in the time until we have solidified regional and YCS decks and SJC decks. It's really pretty much a pre-Cambrian, I guess you could say a pre-Cambrian explosion of different types of decks now that we have 3 main sets in the core game of Yu-Gi-Oh! But like I said, I found some of these deck ideas and what they were calling them off Metagame and TCG Player and whatnot from archives. So you have Dark Elf, your standard beatdown thing that was being used a lot more than people think nowadays. Your Lajin, your Man-Eater Bug, your Magician of Faith, Double Witch, Sangan, 2 Wall of Illusion, your Delinquent Duo, your Confiscation, 2 of them, your Forceful Sentry. That's just nasty. That's just ripping people's hands apart. Heavy Storm, 2 Acts of Despair, your OCG artwork and your TCG artwork. Your Change of Heart, your Monster Reborn, your Pot of Greed, your Holy Trinity, your Darkhold, Regeki, Swords, Fissure, Magic Jammer to stop these powerful spell cards from going off. Your Mirror Force, your Trapples. And the name I found for this deck was Handlock.deck. That was the name of this deck. It was Handlock. Ignore the side deck. That's me doing that. But this is what the deck looked like. You pretty much can tell it's just a beat down, nasty strategy of popping your monsters and just draining your resources from your hand. It's very, very, very nasty. Next, we have something called Snatch Lock. Now, Snatch Lock is a beat-down theme, but it's abusing Snatch and Steal and Change of Heart mainly. So you have your 3 Summon Skull, your 2 Dark Elf, as you can see, your Man-Eater Bug for removal, your Magician of Faith at 3 of because you wanted to add back your Snatch and Steals and whatnot, your Witch of the Black Forest, your Sangan, your Delinquent Duo, your Forceful Sentry, your Snatch and Steal, Heavy Storm, Soul Exchange, Change of Heart, your Holy Trinity here, Pot, Monster, Darkhold, Regeki, Swords, Fissure, Magic Jammer, OCG artwork, TCG artwork, Mirror Force, and Traphold. So the thing here is I have a beatdown deck. But what I'm going to do is when you bring out your big monster, I'm going to steal it away from you. Okay? Now I'm going to tribute that off from my big monster, Summon Skull. And you can see he has multiple different ways of doing that. You have your Snatch and Steals and your Soul Exchange. So be careful if you summon big monsters on this guy. So that was called Snatch Lock. The last one is my favorite, and this is based off a similar deck that I was playing at the time, or a similar theme, because at this time you have to remember archetypes are not a thing yet. It's themes, and pretty much they're themes. That's what they literally are. Different ideas and concepts. You're going to start to see, as I've showed you here, you've started to see the development of a deck called Hand Control. Hand Control, when we get to 2003, you're going to see Hand Control explode, because then you have Don Zaluk and you have a lot more options. But you're starting to see the birth of the first meta game deck called Hand Control. That is what you're starting to see right here. So you have, for this one, this is pretty much a control hand. That's what was the name of the deck he named, Control Hand. I didn't come up with these names. This is what I found online. Dark Elf, White Magical Hat, Man-Eater Bug. Okay, White Magical Hat, if you don't know what this does, when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent's life points, your opponent discards 1 card randomly from his or her hand. All right? You have that, Man-Eater Bug, Magician of Faith, Witch, 3 Forceful Sentry, Double Delinquent Duo, Confiscation. That's just disgusting. Double Snatch and Steal, Double Heavy Storm, Change, Monster Reborn, Pot, Darkhold, Regeki, 2 Swords, 3 Acts of Despair. So you're taking the Acts of Despair, equipping it to your White Magical Hats to make it 2,000. And when it inflicts battle damage, guess what? You randomly discard a card from your hand. 3 Fissure, so you can get attack directly more. Your Magic Jammers, your Mirror Forces, and your Trap Holes. That is disgusting. But you're starting to see here, guys, the development of the first metagame deck called Hand Control. Now, it won't take... when the meta becomes more defined, because remember, this is the pre-Cambrian period of Yu-Gi-Oh! It's still evolving, it's still changing, it's still morphing. You only have 3 core sets out. By 2003, like I was saying a couple minutes ago, you're going to see the development fully of Hand Control. But I hope you guys enjoy just an idea and concepts of what people were thinking back then of these decks. Like I said, these I found on Metagame and Pojo. If you do some digging, you can find old stuff that is still out there. But I literally spent like an hour and a half trying to find this stuff. But let's get back to talk about the ban list that changed all these decks in October. Okay, guys, I hope you guys all enjoy a little sneak peek and a little view of
what was going on in the meta, what were people playing in that time by looking at those decks. Now we're going to go into October. So on October the 1st, 2002, we have our first limited list. There was no ban list at this time. That does not come until 2004. We only have a limited list. Konami was not banning cards. The first card to be limited in the new list was Cyberjar. Cyberjar was limited. Confiscation went to limited. Delinquent Duo went to limited. Snatch and Steal went to limited. Forceful Sentry went to limited. And Upstart Goblin went to limited. So those are the cards that were limited on that ban list. I will put up, if I'm able to, over here, a list of just an idea of what the ban list was like. So you're going to see there, that's the entire ban list as of October 2002, pretty much. So let's go talk about early October. There's another thing that comes out. We have Tournament Pack 2 comes out very shortly. Tournament Pack 1 was only out for like a month, and then Tournament Pack 2 came out. But I'm going to talk about Tournament Pack 2 in next month's episode. But pretty much also something I should mention about this ban list is an important statement, which I find very interesting, that Konami made actually. They said in this ban list, Japanese, Asian, English, and counterfeit cards are now illegal in Yu-Gi-Oh! So, apparently before October 1st, 2002, you could play Japanese cards, you could play Asian English cards, if you guys know what those are, and you could play counterfeit and illegal counterfeit cards. So you could play a whole bunch of these like fake Yu-Gi-Oh cards that have bad card text. You could have actually played them in Yu-Gi-Oh before October 1st, 2002. Just saying, if you got a time machine, you can go back and do that. Now on October 4th, 2002, we actually had our first tins come out in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Now in the tins, they contained 2 packs of Legend of Blue Eyes, 2 Metal Raiders pack, and 1 Magic Ruler pack. So a total of 5 packs total. The different ones had pictures of Yugi, Joey, and Kaiba on them. You had Dark Magician tin, Blue Eyes tin, Red Eyes tin, Lord of D tin, Summon Skull, and Black Skull Dragon tin. So that will round out today's episode. Next week we will talk about next month, we will talk about Jinzo, Tournament Pack 2, the net ban list as we head into the new year of 2003. That was a long ass time ago. But if you guys enjoyed this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to see other awesome content. I hope you guys all love this video. Please support the channel through different means by liking, sharing, subscribing, and if you'd like to, please go to my Patreon and give me support if you guys enjoy this. I love doing this series, and I hope to continue it in the future. But guys, I need your support. So till next time, guys, take care, have fun dueling, good luck dueling, and I'll see you guys next time. Go have fun playing Yu-Gi-Oh!